I've said it before, but there is an endless ocean of Souls-likes out there, and plenty of them are terrible. There's also some gems like Hollow Knight, Neo, Code Vein, Lies of P, Mortal Shell, and more. With how much I love Dark Souls, I feel compelled to check out Souls-likes when I see them, which led to this video. I'm Sam the Ashen, and this is Sands of Aura. Sands of Aura is a dark fantasy Souls-like action RPG with a top-down perspective kinda similar to Diablo or Path of Exile, except it's a lot less flashy and more methodical. There's no ability bar, instead it follows in Souls-like footsteps with fewer and simpler options. The game came out in October 2023, a little over a year ago. I know, I can't believe it's 2025. But the game only has a bit over 500 reviews, which is not a lot at all. And considering it's been out for a while, it struck me as odd considering the game looked pretty well made. With it being on sale, I decided to jump in. At the forefront here is obviously combat. With any Souls-like, combat is one of the aspects that really have to be nailed for a game to work. All else could potentially be average, as long as the combat is really fun. Sands of Aura's combat system is kinda similar to a Souls game. You have your regular or light attack, a slower, more powerful heavy attack, and a few abilities. In this game, you have a corruption meter, which lets you unleash a weapon-specific ability that is stronger the more it's charged up. You also have spell blades, which are different abilities for every weapon type, and you game them by using your special attacks. The spell blades affect attacks, dodges, and blocks, depending on which one you do first. They also have different elements like fire, ice, lightning, to apply different effects to your enemies. There's a pretty extensive crafting system and upgrading system, but it's also pretty simple at its core. You can craft different weapon types, interchanging the blade, the handle, and the pommel, and the codex, changing the effect, the moveset, and special effects respectively. Instead of consuming a material when crafting a new weapon, you learn the blueprint of the upgrade and then you can craft it infinitely as long as you have enough souls or glint in this game's currency. I really like this system as it didn't feel grindy at all, and it lets you experiment with all different types of things, which is usually really good for gameplay. There's also a big emphasis on runes that you can slot into your armor, ranging from a haste rune that lets you attack faster to armor penetration runes, and all these runes you get from defeating enemies can be upgraded through crafting. There's also talismans that gives you passives like a magnet that pulls glint from enemies when they die, or a base 20% damage bonus for a certain type of weapon, and more. You unlock talisman slots from finding scriptures and using them to get more slots. So the progression is completely gear-based with no leveling. And even though I pretty much always prefer being able to level up, I still really enjoyed this system. As I mentioned before, the top-down view is fine, but the decision of a full 360-degree rotation for the camera feels like an odd choice to me. Sure, it's nice to be able to rotate and see more of the world, but it also makes the exploration a little confusing, mainly because of the lack of a minimap. If the camera angle was fixed, the exploring would be slightly less confusing because the directions of things wouldn't change. But with the full rotation, it's super easy to get turned around and backtrack all over the place. I really didn't have major problems with this after I learned the hub area and then made a conscious effort to look for landmarks to help, but for someone who is directionally challenged, I can easily see this making exploring and playing the game a total nightmare. I can also appreciate that during dialogue there are hints about where to go and what to look out for, but plenty of people skip dialogue, especially in an action RPG. Besides that, exploring Sands of Aura is pretty enjoyable. The level design is solid and obviously inspired by Dark Souls, with ladders to kick down and elevators to unlock for shortcuts, It's really a staple of the genre at this point, and for a lot of the time, I want games to impart their own style. But I really don't mind it for the shortcut aspect. If it works, it works. There's one specific part that I really enjoyed, and if you play Dark Souls, I feel like it's hard not to appreciate. On your way to take down Seath the Scaleless, there's an icy cave, and there seems to be no way to get to certain parts. If you look closely, you can see the snowflakes falling hit something invisible. There's even a body with an item on it to give you the hint. And like right out of Dark Souls, Sands of Ora has an icy cave with invisible platforms that you have to watch where the snowflakes land to see where to go. I don't feel like this is a trope that's overused at all, and I was really happy to see it in the game. As I've said many times before, good exploration comes from making the player want to explore, and a key part of that is rewarding players for going out of their way to search areas that are off the beaten path. Although they're a bit basic, the game does have optional paths with nice little rewards waiting for you. It might be a special enemy, it might be a treasure chest, or a new piece of armor. Either way, it's great to reward exploration. Another part of good exploration is making your environment fun to look at. Whether the environment is beautiful or creative or unique, just something to catch the player's eye can go a really long way in making exploration enjoyable. Some of the exploration involves traversing the sand dunes in a vehicle called the Grain Wake. The first time I used it, I thought for sure it would be tedious and boring, but with a combination of fast travel and being able to ramp off of the dunes, it wasn't too bad, especially because you really only have to travel to each location once. I'm also usually not a big fan of desert environments, but the atmosphere and the environment was pretty cool. Before we move on, I want to talk a little bit about difficulty. Difficulty is usually a tricky thing to nail in games, especially with a Souls-like. I think it's meant to be difficult, but fair, and I think a lot of the Souls-like fans would agree. And luckily, for the most part, that's true for this game. The times that it's not usually have something to do with the hitboxes. You might fall off of an elevator even though you didn't step off the platform. You might get hit by an enemy when really you didn't make any contact. Or it might have been the other way around. You should have gotten hit, but it didn't register. This didn't happen super often, definitely not enough to be a game-breaking experience, or really affect my overall experience. It was just a minor annoyance sometimes. The other part of difficulty is really just finding your way around. I already touched on that before, but I think it's important enough to keep in mind. Well, with all this good stuff, it's time for the other shoe to drop. The biggest downside of Sands of Ora is that the game overall seems to be unfinished. It doesn't seem like a demo or anything. All the features are there, everything seems to be pretty fleshed out for the most part, but you can still tell that there is plenty more that the developer wanted to do with this game that for some reason couldn't or didn't. On one hand, it's kind of disappointing that the game never reached its full potential. On the other hand, I'm grateful that we got a good game at all, even if it is only 6 to 8 hours. There are things like collision against the walls. I know this is kind of a specific and minor gripe, but I like in games where you can swing your weapon at a wall and it banks off of it, it clanks off of it. You know that you hit something and there's a sound effect for it and everything, and there's nothing of the sort in this game. Your weapon kind of just phases through the environment. I guess it's not a major thing, it just screams unfinished to me. There's also entire areas that seem to be all the way developed, but are not implemented into the game at all. So there are definitely some things that were meant to be in the game that just never got made into it. At the end of the day, I would recommend this game, if you really like Souls-likes and it's on sale. $25 isn't totally crazy, but it is kind of a lot for such a short game. There's definitely bigger and better Souls-likes out there, with much more content, and some even cheaper. But if you've already played all those and you want something different, you might have fun with this. It's probably not a must-play for anyone, but it's a decent little fun-size experience. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, let me know by leaving a like, and let me know if you have any thoughts on this game or any Souls-like in general. I'd love to hear from you. If you want to see more from me, then subscribe. I post once every 2 weeks on Sunday, so I'll never clog up your feed. I hope you have a good one. Peace out.